Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're putting the modern gig economy under the microscope. And we're talking about those huge platforms, Uber, DoorDash, Instacart, that have just completely reshaped how we get services, all built on this promise, right? Total flexibility, independence for the workers.
Yeah, it was definitely sold as the ultimate side hustle. Be your own boss, set your own hours. But our sources, well, they reveal a pretty deeply structured system. We're talking proprietary algorithms, lots of data extraction, and some, frankly, deceptive pay practices. These things systematically trap workers in debt and precarity. We're really digging into the mechanisms behind what we're calling the gig trap.
Right. So our mission here is to dissect that source material, show you exactly how the system operates. And I think the first thing we have to confront is the money, the actual financial reality. We've got data from a 2023 survey, I believe, in Texas, showing the median net pay for a lot of these gig workers. After you account for all their operating expenses, it often hovers around a shocking $5.12 per hour.
$5.12. Yeah, that's net. After gas, car maintenance, the extra self-employment taxes, all of it. And then you compare that to the living wage needed just for a single adult in that same area, it's well over $16 an hour. So you start to see the scale of the economic instability that's kind of baked into this model.
And the root cause, the fundamental reason this happens, it seems to be the worker classification, right? Calling them independent contractor.
Precisely. That's the linchpin, that single legal designation. It lets the platforms completely sidestep traditional employer duties, minimum wage, overtime, Social Security contributions, unemployment insurance. And critically, like you said, it shifts all the business operating risk onto the worker. The platform keeps total control through its algorithm, its tech, but accepts basically zero responsibility for the actual costs of doing business.
Okay, let's unpack that power imbalance.
Yeah.
Because it sounds totally one-sided. The platforms have all the key info, pricing, how the algorithm works, customer data. But the worker, they're basically flying blind. That autonomy they advertise, it feels, well, not real.
Our sources call this structure the efficiency paradigm. It sounds technical, but it's essentially a business model laser-focused on maximizing platform profit and, getting more customers. And it does that by aggressively minimizing what they pay for labor and pushing all those high operating risks outwards.
Okay, efficiency paradigm. That sounds like something straight out of an MBA class. What does it actually mean for the person, driving the car, trying to make rent?
It means huge personal expenses. It translates directly. We're talking high gas costs, insurance, replacing tires, the car losing value. Some sources estimate many workers are spending upwards of like $100 a week just on fuel and keeping the vehicle running. When you factor that in, that's what pushes the real hourly wage down, often way below minimum wage levels.
Wow. So the platform's profit actually depends on the worker paying for the platform's core tools. And this leads straight into the debt trap we mentioned earlier.
It does, yeah. Workers are often encouraged, sometimes even through programs linked to the platform, to buy or lease cars. So the main tool they need for their job, it becomes this constant major debt hanging over them. And you get this, some of the lease agreements, they require drivers to put 18,000 miles or more on the car each year. Just think about that. You're rapidly wearing down your own asset, racking up maintenance bills just to keep the job.
The second they sign that lease, they're sort of chained to the system. And the algorithm then makes it impossible to reliably budget to even pay off that debt.
Exactly right. Income volatility is like a key feature, not a bug. The algorithm shifts pay constantly, so budgeting is a nightmare. And then adding insult to injury, a huge chunk of the worker's time isn't even paid. Documents suggest anywhere from 25% to maybe 50% of the hours they spend logged into the app could be unpaid waiting time, just sitting there, burning gas, waiting for a decent offer. This forces workers into taking out high-interest loans or using those instant cash advances, often offered by the platform itself.
Right, monetizing the instability the platform actually created. We'll come back to that sort of cynical financial layer later. But first, let's talk about the pay structures themselves, how the money is determined, especially the whole issue around tips.
Well, the pay algorithms, they seem designed for what some call the race to the bottom. They're basically built to suppress worker pay, all in the name of efficiency. What's really chilling is that the pay rates, they adjust dynamically, and potentially based on deep behavioral profiling. The system might actually predict how willing an individual worker is to accept a lower offer based on their past behavior or current situation.
So wait, if the algorithm figures out you've been sitting idle for half an hour, or maybe you live in a certain area, it calculates you're probably more desperate and offers you less for the same job than it might offer someone else.
That's the core finding, yeah, how personalized data can be weaponized. And because there's zero transparency, the worker can't possibly challenge it. The breakdown of the pay, base fare, surge pricing, how much the platform takes, it's deliberately kept murky, opaque. Workers can't easily verify if they're being paid accurately. A tiny tweak in that secret formula can shift massive amounts of money from the workforce to the platform, and well, nobody would know.
And this lack of transparency, it's been especially controversial when it comes to tips. Tips are crucial, right? Often making up 30, sometimes even 50% of a worker's total take-home pay. But these platforms, they've faced serious lawsuits for basically using customer tips to cover their costs, not add to the worker's earnings.
Yes, it's a huge breach of trust. The customer thinks they're giving extra to the worker, but the platform, in some documented cases, has used that money to meet its own promised minimum payment to the worker, so it's subsidizing itself.
Right.
And this isn't just stories. Platforms have paid out big settlements. DoorDash, for instance, settled a case in New York related to tip skimming between 2017 and 2019. It was a $16.75 million resolution.
So money the customer intended purely for the worker actually just reduced the company's labor expenses.
Exactly. And the algorithm even uses the idea of a tip as a kind of control mechanism. Showing a potential tip up front, that's used as a psychological nudge. It encourages workers to take low-paying or difficult jobs they might otherwise skip. The tip becomes less of a bonus, more of an algorithmic lever to pull.
That manipulation using incentives like that leads us right into the tech that runs this whole show, this idea of digital taylorism and constant algorithmic control. What does that intense surveillance actually look like for a gig worker?
Oh, the data collection is relentless. It's 24/7 tracking, location, speed, how you handle your phone, scrolling patterns, calls made through the app, and crucially, your acceptance and cancellation rates for job offers, all monitored in real time. Sources describe this as digital taylorism. Basically, the app is your tireless, invisible supervisor, constantly measuring everything.
So it goes way beyond just matching drivers with riders or deliveries. It's deep behavioral management. What happens if a worker gets savvy and starts cherry-picking, only taking the really profitable orders?
The algorithm can punish them. That's the finding. The system is designed to spot and penalize behavior that prioritizes the worker's income over the platform's overall efficiency metrics. So workers who turn down too many low-paying offers, they might find that the good, high-value offers just stop coming their way or come less often. The system really rewards total compliance.
And the ultimate punishment, the ultimate disciplinary tool in this digital workplace is deactivation, getting fired by the app instantly.
It's like a digital sword of Damocles, just hanging over every worker's head. You can be deactivated based on metrics that are secret, maybe unverified, maybe generated purely by the algorithm, and often there's absolutely no human review, no real appeal process, no explanation. The data on this is pretty stark. 65% of workers say they're very fearful of being deactivated, and an alarming 40% say they've actually experienced it. Imagine just suddenly losing your income stream based on code with no recourse. It's devastating.
We also need to touch on bias here. This tech isn't always neutral, is it? If the AI learns from historical data that reflects, say, demographic income gaps, couldn't the algorithm just bake those biases right in?
That's a major systemic risk, yes. It can absolutely perpetuate or even amplify existing biases in who gets offered which jobs and at what rates. And even the surveillance tools themselves can be biased. Things like biometric ID checks, the facial recognition used to prevent fraud. Studies show they can have higher error rates for people with darker skin tones. That creates yet another potential layer of automated unfair treatment.
And circling back to the debt trap, the platforms seem pretty adept at finding ways to profit from the very desperation they help create.
Absolutely. It's quite cynical, really, because they have perfect visibility into a worker's often precarious, immediate cash flow needs. They invent new revenue streams around that instability, like offering instant cash out features charging workers a fee to access money they've already earned. They're basically leveraging the worker's anxiety about waiting for payday into another profit center for the platform.
Okay, so this systemic instability, it clearly have huge consequences beyond just the worker's bank balance. Let's talk about the other costs, the psychological toll, the impact on society. What does this constant quantified control do to people?
The psychological impact is severe. Our sources talk about it quite a bit. The constant stream of unpredictable job offers, the randomness of surge pricing, it creates what some call algorithmic gamblification. It functions a bit like a slot machine psychologically. It compels workers to stay logged in, always chasing that next potential high-paying win. And that leads to chronic anxiety, exhaustion, sleep deprivation, serious burnout.
Yeah, and the alienation must be intense. Always being judged by this secret machine, no human manager to talk to appeal to.
Exactly. It fosters a deep sense of powerlessness. And the societal costs, they're significant too, though maybe less visible immediately. This model clearly worsens inequality. It creates this large, precarious underclass without basic safety nets like health insurance or retirement savings. It effectively shifts major social costs onto the public sphere. Think about public assistance for uninsured workers who get sick or injured, or even the extra wear and tear on roads from all these contract vehicles that's borne by taxpayers. And we should also highlight the ethical dimension. This kind of exploitation often disproportionately impacts vulnerable populations. Immigrants, for example, make up something like 70% of the gig delivery workforce in some areas.
So we've painted a picture of a pretty clear systemic problem as fueled by tech, specific legal classifications.
Mhm.
Where's the pushback coming from? What are regulators and lawmakers starting to do?
Well, the core fight still revolves around that worker classification issue. Employee versus independent contractor. Laws like California's AB 5, which tried to reclassify many gig workers as employees, they remain really pivotal. Though obviously the platforms fight these efforts tooth and nail. But the regulatory net is tightening in other ways. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, they're increasing scrutiny on deceptive pay practices and potentially anti-competitive behavior by these big platforms.
What about tackling the algorithms themselves? Can regulators actually force these companies to open up the black box?
That's really the emerging frontier, yeah. Internationally, the EU's Platform Work Directive is a big step. It aims to set clear ground rules, specifically trying to mandate that platforms disclose how their algorithms decide pay, assign work, handle promotions, and importantly, giving workers the right to challenge decisions made solely by algorithms. We're starting to see policies that treat the algorithm more like a manager, which it effectively is, rather than just some neutral piece of code.
Okay, so if we're looking at concrete solutions, actual reforms, what are the main strategies that worker advocates and policy groups are pushing for to fix this exploitation?
We can probably boil it down to three key legislative demands that come up repeatedly in the sources. First, mandated tip integrity laws, making it crystal clear legally that tips must always be added on top of base pay, never used to meet the platform's own pay obligations. Second, requiring algorithmic impact assessments for wage-setting systems. This means independent auditors would check these systems for inherent biases or, wage suppression tactics.
Okay, tip integrity, algorithmic audits, and the third key demand. You mentioned this idea of a third way for worker classification.
Yes, that's probably the most innovative proposal floating around. A third-way classification would basically create a new legal category for these workers. It would aim to preserve some of the flexibility that, let's be honest, some workers do value. But it would mandate that platforms contribute to prorated benefits, things like sick leave, contributions towards Social Security or health insurance based on the hours worked. The idea is to build a safety net funded by the platforms without necessarily forcing everyone into a traditional full-time employee model.
That sounds like it could be a pragmatic middle ground, potentially. Now, for listeners hearing all this, maybe feeling concerned, what's the most direct, practical thing someone can do right now to support workers based on what we've discussed?
Given everything we've said about how tips can be manipulated by the platforms, the clearest, most immediate action you can take is to tip in cash whenever possible for these services. It just completely bypasses the platform's digital systems and ensures the worker gets the full amount you intended right then and there.
That's really clear, direct advice. Okay, so to kind of wrap up this deep dive, we've shown how the structure of the gig economy isn't just a simple open marketplace. It's really a sophisticated system where that promise of flexibility gets twisted. It's leveraged through opaque practices, aggressive data harvesting, and that key misclassification issue, ultimately transforming work into a form of algorithmic exploitation, often leading to a systemic debt trap for many workers.
Yeah, the pattern seems pretty undeniable when you look at the sources. Opaque pay, relentless data tracking, shifting all the risk. It's a coordinated toolkit. For this gig economy model to become truly sustainable and maybe more equitable, there needs to be a fundamental shift in that power dynamic, moving away from total platform control towards real accountability, transparency, and basic labor rights for the people actually doing the work.
And here's the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. Think about this technological toolkit. The AI management, the pervasive surveillance, the dynamic personalized pricing that was really honed and perfected in the gig economy, it's already spreading rapidly. into other crucial sectors. Logistics, sure, but also healthcare scheduling, customer service, even education. So if the algorithm is becoming the default manager in more and more parts of our economy, and the legal frameworks, the laws haven't really caught up to define what this new kind of boss even is, what does employment truly mean going forward? And maybe more importantly, where is the next gig trap likely to appear?
That's definitely the question we all need to be grappling with as technology continues to reshape our working lives.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.